From JBS Studios in Greater New York, this is the JBS News Update with Teisha Bader.
I'm Teisha Bader with the JBS News Update for Thursday, October the 8th, 2020. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that he will bring the recently signed peace agreement with the United Arab Emirates to his cabinet and the Knesset on Monday. Israeli law dictates that the agreement must still be given the okay by the country's ministers and its legislature. Israel and Jordan signed an aviation agreement today. It allows airlines to cross over and between the two countries' airspace en route to other destinations, which is expected to shorten flight paths. Globes reports that the civil aviation authorities and airports authorities of Israel and Jordan signed the agreement, which states this is a successful conclusion to negotiations that started several years ago, but that were accelerated and completed only after the signing of the peace agreement with the UAE and the historic permit for Israeli flights over Saudi Arabia. Israel's Transportation Minister Miri Regev said thanks to the peace agreement, the state of Israel is becoming more and more integrated into the region. We are opening new forms of cooperation in transport, business, and diplomacy with countries that share borders with us and have similar interests and a common vision of regional peace. Regev added, "I hope that we shall soon be able to announce further developments." Israel and Jordan do, of course, have a peace treaty signed in October of 1994. Next week, as we reported to you, Israeli representatives will meet with representatives from Lebanon, with whom Israel does not have diplomatic ties, for talks on their disputed maritime border. While all representatives will be in the same room, the negotiations will reportedly go through a United Nations representative. Lebanese-based Iranian-backed terror group Hezbollah made it clear that these talks did not, in their opinion, signify or signal any normalization. The group's political wing said today it has absolutely nothing to do with reconciling with what Hezbollah called the greedy Zionist enemy, referring to Israel, nor with the normalization which some Arab countries, they wrote, have adopted. These countries, Hezbollah said, never believed in or practiced resistance against the nation's enemy for a single day. Well, New York leaders are urging adherence to new coronavirus restrictions after protests against those measures. The new restrictions, as we reported to you, were put into place in various hotspots in the state for coronavirus, many of which have large populations of ultra-Orthodox Jews. The measures include limiting gatherings in synagogues to just 10 people in those areas that are hardest hit by the pandemic. For example, in Borough Park, Brooklyn, where the positive test rate on Tuesday for COVID-19 was 10.6%, more than 10 times the overall rate of New York State. On Tuesday night, ultra-Orthodox residents of the Brooklyn neighborhood took to the streets, not socially distanced and mostly not wearing masks, for protests, which included burning masks and turned in one case violent, with a number of protesters beating a fellow member of the community who has advocated for COVID guidelines like mask wearing and social distancing and was trying to videotape the protest. He had to be taken to the hospital. And a Jewish journalist, the Jewish Insider's Jacob Kornbluh, himself also a member of the ultra-Orthodox community, tweeted that he was brutally assaulted and called Nazi for covering the story in continued protests in Borough Park last night. Kornbluh was rescued by other members of the community and by members of the NYPD. Governor Cuomo and Mayor Bill de Blasio addressed the protests and the regulations in separate press conferences where both took care not to single out the Jewish community by name. Cuomo said the reason we're in this situation now is because the enforcement wasn't done. It wasn't enforced in these areas because it's hard to enforce in these areas because they don't want to do it. Orthodox leaders claim that Cuomo misled them about synagogue capacity, and many in the ultra-Orthodox community feel they are being unfairly targeted and blamed for the spread of the virus. De Blasio said in his comments, this is about all New Yorkers. And when you look at the communities in Brooklyn and Queens, it's lots of different kinds of people. When asked specifically about Orthodox Jews, de Blasio said, we're talking about two of the most diverse places on earth, Brooklyn and Queens. So within these areas are many kinds of people. We want to protect everyone. This is based, he said, on data and science. Jewish American poet Louise Gluck has won the Nobel Prize for Literature. The 77-year-old New York native was honored, the Nobel Committee said, for her unmistakable poetic voice that with austere beauty makes individual existence universal. Gluck is a professor of English at Yale. She won the Pulitzer in 1993 for her collection The Wild Iris, and the National Book Award in 2014. In 2016, she received the National Humanities Medal from then-President Barack Obama. By the way, the Nobel ceremony this year, as with most things this year because of the coronavirus, will be held virtually. Taking a look now at our programming for tonight on JBS for Thursday, October the 8th. At 7 o'clock, it's Talmud Study. At 8, journalist Thomas Friedman and former British Prime Minister Tony Blair discuss the future of democracy and globalization in the age of coronavirus, with Professor Yuval Shani of the Israel Democracy Institute. At 9 tonight, Mark Golub sits down with Rabbi Shlomo Riskin on L'chaim. At 10, Professor Ruth Weiss addresses the way in which Jewish students are being harassed on college campuses. That's with Alan Rubenstein by the Tikva Fund. And coming up next, it's the ILTV's Insider. And that's the JBS News Update for Thursday, October the 8th, 2020. I'm Teisha Bader. Stay healthy, stay well.